Hi, welcome to our online discussion of our April 1st, 2016. And my name is Christian Debré, and this is Amy Asbrook, director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
And she was wanting to
Do an
do
April
an
Fool's.
April Fool to you, but I'm not. Okay. Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability right opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disabilities. Today's topics: medical order for life-sustaining treatment, or MOLT.
ST.
MOST, sorry. It will happen quite a lot of time in this discussion because we will not use medical order for life-sustaining treatment, okay? So try to remember.
Okay. Thanks. Medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. Advanced care planning is a good idea in general. It's important to have conversations with your loved ones and your doctor about what medical treatments you would want or not want should you become unable to direct your own care. And it's important to name a person to carry out your wishes if you are unconscious. So that's important.
Yes.
And it's important to remember what treatments you want, because most of the medical orders for life-sustaining treatments is about treatments you don't want.
Yeah. And to choose one people that you are
That you
confident
trust,
in.
that you have a lot of
yeah.
trust in,
Yeah.
because that person is going to be speaking for you when you can't speak for yourself.
For your life.
Right.
You put your life in the hand of these people.
Right. So if you don't have a relative, you can choose a friend, and if you don't have a good friend, you can try to choose an advocate that you feel would represent your wishes. One tool used in advanced care planning is called a medical order for life-sustaining treatment, or a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. And the acronyms for that is MOLST and PULST. And so I'll probably use the term MOLST for the rest of the time. A do not resuscitate order is a kind of MOLST. And as we said, most of them are not so much about life-sustaining treatments, but about not having life-sustaining treatments.
Yeah, a treatment could kill you.
Well, a lack of treatment.
Yeah, basically.
The basic idea is what kind of treatments, such as whether you'd have a feeding tube, whether you'd have respiratory support, that kind of thing, in case you were unconscious and couldn't make the decision for yourself, what kind of treatment you would want. And that's what, and it's a medical order that would say what kind of treatment you would get. Unlike an advance directive, which is a request made by a patient, a MOLST is signed by a doctor and has the effect of a medical order. And that's has a lot of effect. All the medical personnel are going to look at a medical order and say, well, that's, that's what goes.
Yes, that's what we have to do to these people.
Right. That's
this patient.
Right, exactly. So even if you write an advance directive, it might not have as much impact as the medical order.
Yeah, because this is the one for and by the medical personnel most of the time.
Right, exactly. A doctor is supposed to discuss the options with a person who has a terminal illness, help her fill out the form, witness her signature, and then sign it, attesting that the discussion took place. The form is then put in the person's medical record and should be followed, and the action should be followed by staff if the person cannot consent to care. So that's what's supposed to happen. It's only supposed to be for people who have terminal illness It's supposed to be talked over with the person. The person's supposed to make their choices. The doctor signs it, the person signs it, and then it goes into the medical record.
But it is not always what it happened.
Right, exactly. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. Doctors and hospitals often use MOLST, MOLST, with disabled people who have non-terminal illness. These people who most people who are terminally ill have a disability, but many people with disabilities are not terminally ill. So they just sort of they assume if you're disabled, then you're going to die soon. So they'll make you sign one of these documents, or they'll write one up for you.
Yeah.
That's sort of what happens. When deciding whether or not to fill out a MOLST form, a doctor will usually answer the surprise question. The question would be, would he or she be surprised if the person died within the next year? So that's what they mean by the surprise question. This is not an official diagnosis nor a terminal prognosis. It's not supposed to be either one, but it's just a doctor's guess. And it can include many people whose lives are not at risk. So like I said, they just lump disabled people in there because, well, you know, that person might be dead in a year. Who knows? So we'll make them fill out the form, or we'll fill out the form for them. Yet, some state laws extend MOLST to people with a 5-year prognosis. So it isn't just people that the doctor thinks might die in a year. It's the doctor thinks, oh, this person will be dead in 5 years, so we'll have them do the form. Filling out a MOLST is often presented to patients as mandatory, even though it is not. People who refuse may be pressured to do this, to fill out the form. And
that's a kind of abuse.
Yeah, it's a kind of abuse, and it happens a lot, especially, like I said, to people with disabilities. A lot of disabled people I know, when they go into the hospital, the first thing that happens is people start saying, sign a do not resuscitate order, sign a do not resuscitate order.
It happened just a week ago to my father. My father is 86 years old, and a doctor came in when I was there and say, oh, you know, Mr. Debray, at 86 years old, you should.
Right.
Hey, my father is in great shape. He just broke one bone. He's not dying, and he could live to 100 years old, maybe. And this doctor was trying to sail a do not resuscitate order.
Right.
It's not needed at all.
Right, exactly. Many MOLST forms require a simple yes or no answer to proposed treatments, but without any context. So to the question, would you accept a feeding tube, the answer might depend on factors that are not listed on the form. So for example, if you have a terminal prognosis and you're going to probably die within the next 2 weeks, you might not want a feeding tube. But if you have amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and you could live another 3 or 4 years, then you might want to have a feeding tube. So those are very different circumstances. But if it's just a yes or no question on the form, that doesn't give you the opportunity to pick and choose the circumstances.
And no information at all.
Right, exactly. Also, the form might not specify what medical treatments are included in terms such as comfort care and intermediate care.
What is intermediate care?
Right.
I don't know.
Right, exactly. So they could say, well, we'll give you comfort care, without saying that if you start to suffocate, they won't help you. Or if they could say, we'll give you intermediate care, without saying that if you have, if your heart stops, they won't try to start your heart again. Another problem with MOLST is it's biased against life-sustaining technologies. Interventions such as feeding tubes and tracheotomies are presented as negative, intrusive, limiting, and incompatible with a normal life. Presented in such negative information, most people refuse these options, though many disabled people are able to pursue fulfilling and productive lives thanks to these technologies.
There's no dramatic things about a feeding tube or le trou dans la gorge,
The tracheotomy.
tracheotomy. There's no dramatic things.
Right.
Many people lives with it without any trouble.
Right.
It's not perfect, but at least you're living and you could have a very fulfilling life.
Right, and people have respirators on their wheelchairs so they can go wherever they need to go that are run off the battery of the wheelchair. So it's not like it makes you so that you have to stay in the hospital all the time or you have to stay home. It isn't, like Christian said, it's not dramatic. It doesn't mean to limit your life. So a lot of people who have amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or ALS, they say they don't want a breathing tube, breathing help. And so they decide to die instead of accepting help with breathing that could enable them to live for a few more years.
And it's years, not week or month.
Right.
It's years.
Right. The completed MOLST form may not reflect the person's wishes. The person has to trust the doctor that the doctor will resist the pressure to cut costs and honor the person's requests.
Which is sometimes difficult.
Right.
Because hospital or a long time home care or whatever, they have budget.
Right, exactly. Hospitals, doctors are put under pressure to keep the costs in control. And one of the ways is if people die, they don't cost the hospital anything. And that clears out a bed and another person can come into the system. So there's a lot of pressure on doctors to do that. So the person has to trust that the doctor will resist that pressure. Laws allow doctors to overrule a person's request for life-sustaining treatment if the doctor thinks that the care would be futile, meaning that it wouldn't help anyway. Some of the worst of these abuses happen in nursing homes, and here are some examples of what can happen. Some forms don't require the patient's signature, or the doctor may just sign the form and put it in the person's record.
Without any knowledge of the
person.
people.
Yeah. So the family might just find a form that's in the person's medical record, or the person might find the form with the doctor's signature on it, but without his signature on it, and not know how it got there because he didn't participate in writing up the form. Many MOLST forms are filled out by nurses or nurses' aides and may even lack a doctor's signature. And I was doing some research for this presentation, and I was looking at the California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform, and they said that 57% of the forms are filled out by nurses or nurses' aides and don't even have a doctor's signature on them. So that's more than half.
So time to time, you should look at your dossier, your file,
record,
your record. It's your own record and
Right.
you own it. You have the right to look at it.
Right. And that's our advice that we give you throughout what we're talking about. If you've learned anything from today, it's to keep your eye on your own medical record because you don't know what could end up in there. Sometimes forms are changed after the person signs it. So you might have this conversation with your doctor, but then somebody comes along and says, gee, I don't know why they didn't check do not resuscitate and then check that box.
It's happening.
Yeah, those kind of things happen.
And more often than you could think about it.
Right, exactly. One such form provided that anyone could sign to make medical decisions for the person in case of incapacity. So on the form it said, the following people can make decisions for the person, husband or wife, parent, or other, and then it left a line open.
I think it was made in good faith because they was thinking from a niece or an uncle or something like that. But what happened? That they think other is wide open.
Right, exactly. It ended up being wide open, so didn't know. Sometimes nursing home staff ask family members to sign MOLST forms, even though the person has the capacity to make his or her own medical decisions. So the staff might just take the family aside and say, gee, your grandma's really ill, and if she has a heart attack, and what should we do for her? And they would fill out the form instead of grandma, who's perfectly capable of making her own decisions, filling out the form herself.
It's happening.
Right, it does happen. The MOLST form may be explained by a non-medical staff person, such as an admissions coordinator or a business manager, which leads to a lack of informed consent. Because if the person who's explaining the form to you doesn't understand what the medical treatments are, then you're not getting the right information about what medical treatments would be given to you and what it would mean. So if the admissions person is explaining the form to you, you're not giving informed consent. Some doctors and nurses follow the instructions on the form only if they agree with the MOLST. So if the form calls for breathing support, but the medical staff thinks it's futile, they may simply ignore the order. And that happens as well.
And it existing to a slow code.
Right.
In many institutions.
Right, exactly. And the slow code means that if, for example, the person is having trouble breathing, instead of running to the person's side, the staff just kind of goes over when they have time. And if the person stops breathing, well, too bad.
Too bad, he's dead. Oh.
Right.
Oops.
Also, there is a risk of overinterpretation of the MOLST. In one study, over 50% of medical staff misinterpreted a MOLST as including a DNR order when it didn't include that. So that's what staff come to expect when they see those forms. And if they don't see it, they just kind of read it in. Oh yeah, there's a DNR. This is a DNR form, they'll think, rather than a form for life-sustaining treatment. The form should be in both official languages to be understood by the person and the medical staff.
In Canada, it's a minimum.
Right.
English people, speaking people in Canada are not really in danger, but French-speaking people are quite in danger in a lot of parts of Canada.
Right. And sometimes it happens in some parts of Quebec where it's hard to find information in English, but either way, it should be available in both languages.
The form are normally available and widely available, but in English-speaking part of Canada, a lot of time it's only in English.
Right, it's not available in French.
No.
So it should be in both languages so that both the people who are filling it out and the staff understand what the terms mean.
Quebec and New Brunswick are very, very, very bilingual. Part of Ontario too, but outside of those areas, French is kind of difficult to find sometimes.
Right. There may be confusion and conflict between an advance directive, which comes from the person, and an MOLST, which comes from the doctor. The MOLST has the authority of a medical order and is more likely to be followed by staff. So if if there's an advance directive in the file, the medical staff might look at that, but then they'll say, oh, but there's a medical order, so we'll follow the medical order because it was written by a doctor, and we're medical staff, so we have to follow what the doctor says.
And the doctor is the boss.
Right, exactly. The MOLST stays in effect until it is removed. So that means if you get out of the hospital and then 3 years later you go back in the hospital and that is still in your chart, then you might still have a do not resuscitate order on your chart. And revocation can be difficult.
Oh yes, because this paper are spread in many places.
Right.
Okay, in the folder, in the paper trace of your file, and in the computer, and sometimes in many places in your computer. When you try to remove, sometimes they forget one or two places, and it appears another time.
Right, exactly. In one study of 5 cases in Manitoba, 2 people who tried to have a DNR order removed from their loved ones' charts were refused and harassed, while another person was pressured to accept a DNR order. So it's hard to get studies on these things because people don't like to talk about it, and oftentimes somebody has died, and so the family doesn't want to talk about it.
No, it's done, so forget it. We are tired. That's what happened mostly.
Right. So in these 5 cases, 2 families were unable to remove the DNR because they were harassed. 1 person was pressured to put a DNR, and the other 2 families allowed the DNR on the person's chart, and
okay,
the
we
person
agree
died.
that it's not scientific,
Right.
but it's kind of a sign that we have to look at.
Right, exactly. This was, just taking 5 random.
And that problem
That's what
over
happened.
5, oops.
Right. There may be problems with the physician order signed by a doctor at one institution being honored by the medical staff at another hospital. So if your doctor signed that you want breathing help and you want a feeding tube and that kind of thing, but then you're taken to another hospital and your doctor isn't given admitting privileges at that hospital, then you're
Then the new staff of the hospital, of the hospital, may say, "Oh, we will not respect that. It doesn't look like good for the patient."
Right. This doctor isn't official here, so we'll just do our own form. It's important that patients and their families be vigilant in checking to see what is written on a MOLST and demanding that it be changed if it doesn't agree with their wishes. And that means it means you may not even know if there's one in your file, so you should check. And if there's something in your file that you don't like a do not resuscitate order, you should have it removed, or you should demand that it be removed.
Yeah, and it is your right, and you have the right to fight for.
Right, exactly. So if there's one thing that you take away from this webcast today, just remember that it's your responsibility to be careful that your wishes are going to be honored. And if the form says the right things, that there's a chance that they will be honored, but you have to be careful. And part of being careful is to make sure you have somebody who's going to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself, and make sure that person knows exactly what you want in all the possible cases. So we've talked a lot recently about safeguards and protections, and there's a reason for that, which is that in Canada we are being forced to accept assisted suicide, but really fundamental position is that we oppose the legalization of assisted suicide.
Yeah, because it's opened a door to many, many mistakes. And even if it's due on a good faith, it's putting in danger a lot of people, particularly handicapped people.
Right. And there are many reasons to oppose it. First, because it's unnecessary. Everyone has the option to commit suicide and to refuse medical care and to have palliative sedation on demand. And you were talking about a criminal who
committed suicide. In Quebec, we have another public case where Sonia Guillemette, I think, was committed suicide in an hospital. Like another case that we have, Gabriel Bouchard, we have an interview with him. And so it became public that people could suicide themselves.
Right. She starved herself to death in a hospital. And
with the help of the hospital,
right.
And without the needing of any other law that the one had before.
Right, exactly. She didn't need Quebec's assisted suicide law to do what she did. She just starved herself to death and had comfort care while she did it.
Yeah, and people who think it was difficult are just not knowing what's happening. Those people die slowly and with care and without any kind of pain, special pain, and they just, at the end, sleep and die.
Right. So basically, people don't need external help to kill themselves.
No.
And they don't need assisted suicide and euthanasia to be legal. If that's what they want to do. We don't want people to be killing themselves, but if that's what they really want to do, they don't need it to be legal to do that.
And people who try to starve themselves, the most difficult part is the first day.
Right. So also another reason is because it's discriminatory, because people without disabilities receive suicide prevention services if they express a wish to die. People with disabilities will be encouraged and assisted to kill themselves, and that's different treatment, and that's discrimination.
And the two die that we just spoke about it is a kind of proof. The first one was disabled, Gabriel Bouchard, and the second one was a criminal who doesn't want to go to jail. So there was a very big motivation to kill herself.
Right, and Gabriel Bouchard, when we interviewed him, we asked him if he thought he would be allowed to kill himself if he were not disabled, and he said no, he didn't think they would let him kill himself if he wasn't disabled. Okay, another reason is that choice is an illusion, because the choice to die cannot be free as long as people with disabilities don't have the choice in where and how to live. And because of lack of access, lack of accessible housing, lack of home care services and decent revenue, people with disabilities don't have realistic life choices.
Yeah, if we receive pressure from anywhere, from everywhere, you may choose to die.
Right, exactly. It's not a free choice. People always say, but it's my free choice, but it isn't a free choice if you don't have a choice in where and how you live. And finally, one of the reasons is that safeguards don't work, because where these practices are legal, safeguards do not prevent people with disabilities from being wrongly killed. Now, there are several goals for our webcasts. One is to give disabled people a place to talk about these issues among ourselves from our point of view. Another is to recognize the experience and expertise of disabled people in dealing with discrimination and the medical system. And finally, to take our place in the public debate aside from conservatives and progressives, liberal people who support assisted suicide. We're actually taking a more progressive position than that, because we look at the social problems that underlie the push for assisted suicide. To view our videos, go to YouTube and use the search engine of your choice and search for the terms euthanasia and disability, and you'll see the videos that we've done over the last two and a half years.
You will find us very, very easily.
Right. To participate live, you can send me your email address and I'll send you a link to join us live, and that will arrive about 15 minutes before the broadcast.
And everybody is welcome.
Right, exactly. For more information on the subjects we discuss, visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. That's all one word, and we update that very frequently. Visit our website at tvndy.ca, and we don't update that quite so frequently. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to Christian for helping out.
Thank you, Amy.
And please join us again next week.
See you
Till
next week.
time.
Bye.
Bye.